Hello everyone, today I want to share my Yae build and team compositions. As always, I start with the build, then go over team compositions and show some Abyss gameplay at the end.
Sight to behold. Right here, right now. Right here.
There kind of are two different stat lines you can aim for. One is the usual sub DPS build, and the other one is more focused around elemental mastery. It's probably a little bit of a meme build, but it still performs surprisingly well. I'll go over the usual build first. So that's attack, a crit rate, crit damage, and in her case, obviously, electro damage bonus. And you definitely need high energy recharge. Her elemental burst skill is very expensive, so I'd say at least 180%. If you have Constellation 1 though, you definitely can go lower, like 160%. And you don't need too much elemental mastery. Try to avoid it even, I'd say. As for talents, the normal attacks aren't too impressive. You can definitely choose to ignore them, and for the elemental skill and elemental burst skill, I think it's pretty close. They are both pretty strong. I'd say the elemental burst skill is probably safer to level up first because it gives you more coverage into running an Emblem of Severed Fate set, for example. I just chose to level up the elemental skill first because I was memeing around with the elemental mastery build a little bit. As for constellations, most of them are just a straight up damage increase. Constellation 1 is really interesting though because it restores up to 24 energy, which actually helps a lot. It essentially means you can get away with less energy recharge. Constellation 4 is quite interesting as well because it pretty much gives a 100% uptime electro damage bonus of 20% to your whole team. Obviously a lot of value in mono electro teams. As for weapon options, if you're looking for something to craft, the Hakushin ring is great base stats, and if you're triggering a lot of elemental reactions, even better. As for other 4-star options, the Witsith is obviously great, especially if you have it rank 5, because it can even compete with some 5-star weapons with these stats. Otherwise, the new event weapon, the Oathworn Eye, is great as well. It's basically just a giant stat stick. Otherwise, if you have a 5-star weapon, as always, it's probably your best option, but in case of the Lost Prayer, I gotta say, I don't like it as much because it loses its effect when the character leaves the field. So, I guess I get into more detail later about snapshotting, and then you will understand. As for artifacts, we already covered substats earlier. For main stats, you definitely want the attack percentage here unless you're missing a lot of energy recharge. Always electro damage bonus here and crit rate or crit damage, whichever one balances your build better in the last slot. And since Yae has Ascension stat crit rate, it's most likely crit damage, to be honest. For sets, the Emblem of Severed Fate set is great because Yae's elemental burst skill hits actually quite hard. And otherwise, you could pick something like the 2-piece Thundering Fury set for the electro damage bonus and pair it with any other 2-piece set that provides extra stats, like for example Gladiator for attack, or again the Emblem set for extra energy recharge, or something like the Wondrous Troop set for some elemental mastery. And now for the elemental mastery build, and let me start with a little disclaimer already, because these stats are incredibly hard to farm and it actually performs a little worse than the other build, so I wouldn't go out of my way unless you already have these artifacts. And I just went for a really high attack, crit rate. Obviously I sacrificed a lot of crit damage for these stats, and otherwise I also sacrificed all electro damage. And I went for 800 elemental mastery, and you don't really need energy recharge because you mainly want to deal damage with your turrets. As for artifacts, I went for the Emblem set and Wondrous Troop set, and just high stats, especially elemental mastery. 80 here, and main stat here, main stat here, and main stat here. Now let's talk about teams. I will keep it short here because I already talked about it in a lot of detail in my last video and my opinion hasn't really changed. I will link it below if you're interested. The one thing I would disagree on though is, I already mentioned it earlier, I think Sarah is terrible. Unless you have her Constellation 6 and run an Emblem set Yae, for example, for big burst damage setups. So to quickly touch on it here, Yae is a sub DPS who only deals damage, but she is really good at it, and you can bring her to pretty much any comp. So just pick a random healer, for example Bennett. Any healer works, but most people prefer him, and a sub DPS, for example Jingshou, or any support, for example an Anemo character also works. And in the last slot, any main DPS that isn't cryo. Something like Ganyu or Ayaka isn't really great because superconduct obviously doesn't benefit them. So pick something like, for example, Klee, and you have an overload comp, and If you alternatively want to try a more like quick swap style team, you just pick 3 sub DPS, for example with a Zhangling, and you have like a national team with Yae, I guess. Now for the showcase, first I want to talk a little bit about her elemental skill. She can place down 3 turrets and level them up to level 3 to increase their damage by placing them close to each other. As you see, these 2 turrets are tethered together by this light and indicate that they are leveled up and deal more damage. So in the beginning you might place them down in a straight line, but as you see, only the middle one is level 3, the other ones are level 2, so the ideal setup is like a triangle setup to have all of them level 3, like this. And one last thing you want to be aware of is if you place them on top of each other, it doesn't work, they just get replaced and destroyed. So if you do this, for example, you see it doesn't work. I already mentioned snapshotting earlier. Unfortunately, Yae doesn't snapshot. It basically means that a skill takes the stats of a character when you activate it, and it deals damage based off these for the entire duration. This is the case for Zhangling's elemental burst skill, for example, unfortunately not for Yae's turrets though. If Yae loses or gains a buff, the turrets will change damage dynamically. In most situations it doesn't really matter because most buffs are fairly long, so it's even preferable to place down 3 turrets before pressing Bennett's burst skill, for example. The one synergy that suffers a lot from this is Asara, who only buffs for 6 seconds, and things like the weapon I mentioned earlier. And now on how to actually play this character. You first place down your 3 turrets, pretty close to each other, then you press your elemental burst skill and it will deal damage for once for every turret, so it hits 4 times in total, as you see here. And it will destroy the totems in the process, but it also resets their cooldown, so you can just resummon them and you're done on this character. Very straightforward, very simple. Alright, and now some Abyss gameplay. I thought it would be more interesting to show off the Elemental Mastery build. It is like 15 seconds slower, which I still consider good though. As you see, you mostly just place down turrets and switch off Yae to normal attack on Zhangling as filler. On the regular build, I think filling with Yae normal attacks is also fine in this team comp, but on the EM build, she is just missing too many stats for her normal attacks to be worth it. With that, I'm gonna let this clip run out and come back at the end of the video.
Right here, right now, right here. Boba, get them! Rain outlines your fate. Wait, everybody stand! Let me weave you a burst. Eat this! Emerge, right here, emerge. A sight to behold. Right now, emerge. Boba, get them! Teamwork is dreamwork. Rain cutter.
Alright, we made it to the end. Thank you very much for watching. I hope this helped inspire your own builds. Stay tuned for more videos. Until then, have fun and bye bye.